Hello again. Now, will humans live forever? Will robots eventually take over from us? Or is there an alternative mixed way ahead? Some enthusiasts are using technology to alter their own bodies, turning movie-born fantasies into reality.
Your storage capacity?
I can carry nearly 80 gigs of data in my head.
Input the data into the brain of a human courier.
You can't just go, I've got a chip type 2. My head opens.
What, like this?
Don't.
One of the pioneers of biohacking is Kevin Warwick. He implanted a chip into his arm that transmits signals from his wrist to a computer. While this artist uses technology to correct color blindness with a device that translates color into sound. And a computer programmer decided that a flash drive would be a better replacement for half of his finger. We asked cybernetics researcher Tim Cannon about the body modifications.
I have a magnet implanted in my finger. I have an RFID chip here, and I have an NFC XNT chip here. And this one interacts with my phone, and it has GPS coordinates stored on it. RFID gets me into my local hacker space where I do all kinds of work. So I just put my hand up against the door and the door opens. This is not what I would call safe. We search for the lowest risk possible. I think most people who are thinking into the future are thinking about that exact concept, and Google and Microsoft are no exception there. And I think that biometric data is definitely desirable for very many companies for obviously very many reasons. If you take that intelligence and put it into humans and increase their intelligence, then the human race continues, only highly more capable.
Police in Russia are on the lookout for the person or people who deliberately ran over a bear. The animal escaped under the vehicle and managed to get a little revenge of its own. See how that played out on our website. And size does matter. A machete-wielding robber tries his luck in a US store but is chased off by the owner armed with an even bigger weapon. Watch the video on RT.com. When the US government announced it would finally release its grip on the internet in 2015, many saw it as a milestone. But now Washington says it will retain oversight of the world's online domain system for at least another year. The Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, or ICANN, is a non-profit organization. It manages the registration of web domains as well as their maintenance and development. But it's still being kept in check by a US government agency.
What does ICANN do? To reach another person on the internet, you type an address into your device, a name or a number. That address must be unique so computers know where to find each other. ICANN maintains and administers these unique identifiers across the world.
Well, Washington says it needs to be sure its oversight of ICANN will be passed on to an independent group of global stakeholders instead of another government. Internet freedom activist Alfredo Lopez thinks the US is determined to put up a final fight before it lets the web go.
The reality is the internet has been controlled by the United States. English is still the primary language of the internet. Much of the understandings, much of the things taken for granted in running the internet have to do with the United States. And the United States has an enormous amount of power. Many of the technology organizations and companies that dominate the internet are based in the United States. The United States doesn't ever give anything up unless it's pressured and forced to. Now, we're hoping the rest of the world that comprises most of the internet now, most of the internet's not in the United States, can pressure the United States to foster a much more democratic and generalized domain naming system.
Some world news in brief now. At least 20 Iraqi soldiers have died in a suicide attack on the town of Baji. According to reports, Islamic State jihadists are behind the attack on the town that's home to the country's biggest oil refinery. The area has been contested by ISIL, Shia militias and government troops. Recently, Shia fighters recaptured a key part of the town from the jihadists. A large propane gas tank has exploded in the U.S. city of Las Vegas, leaving one man injured. He was refueling gas bottles when the blast happened. The cause of the explosion is still under investigation. Jailed U.S. Army whistleblower Chelsea Manning has narrowly escaped being placed in solitary confinement. She's been slapped with 3 weeks of recreational restrictions for possessing unapproved materials in her cell at Kansas military prison. Activists say they helped her avoid solitary punishment with a petition of more than 100,000 signatures asking to forgive the violation of prison rules. Manning is serving 35 years for passing classified military documents to WikiLeaks. Fellow U.S. whistleblower John Kiriakou also spent time behind bars for his revelations. He says Manning's civil rights are being violated.
This just shows how fearful military authorities are, and even civilian prison authorities writ large, fearful of information, fearful of light, fearful of their own practices and their own policies becoming public. I spent a great deal of time in the prison law library while I was there. That is a constitutional right, whether you are in a U.S. civilian prison or in a military prison. You have a constitutional right to a law library. The Supreme Court has decided that. So for Chelsea Manning to be denied access to a law library is a violation of her civil rights.
And that is all the news we have for this hour. But up next, do stay with us, because Crosstalk debates the ongoing war of words against Russia at the UN Security Council.